If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. The night everything changed. The McCann family arrived at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz on April 28, 2007, settling into apartment 5A with their 3 young children. The ground floor unit faced directly onto the public street, with large patio doors opening to a small garden area. From the street side, anyone could see straight through the apartment's main rooms during daylight hours. Madeleine and the twins slept in a bedroom positioned at the front corner of the building. Their room had 2 windows, one facing the car park and another overlooking the side street. The bedroom door opened directly into the main living area, just a few steps from both the front door and the patio entrance. This layout meant that anyone entering the apartment could reach the children's room within seconds. The tapas restaurant sat roughly 120 meters away across the resort complex. While the adults could see the general area of their apartment block during dinner, trees and other buildings blocked any clear view of apartment 5A itself. The group had established a routine of checking on their children every 30 minutes, walking back through the resort grounds to peer into bedrooms or listen at doors. Resort staff later confirmed that many families followed similar patterns, leaving young children unattended while dining nearby. The Ocean Club promoted itself as a safe, family-friendly environment where such arrangements felt natural and secure. On the morning of May 3rd, as the McCann family prepared for what would become their final day together, Madeleine made a remark that would later haunt every investigation. During breakfast at their apartment, she asked her parents a simple question: "Why didn't you come when we were crying last night?" Kate and Jerry McCann later recalled feeling only mild concern at the time. Children often had restless nights on holiday, and they assumed Madeleine might have had a bad dream or woken briefly during the night. They asked her what she meant, but received no clear answer. The conversation quickly moved on to the day's planned activities. Only after Madeleine vanished did this innocent breakfast exchange take on a darker meaning. Had someone already entered the children's bedroom on a previous night? Police investigators seized on this possibility, suggesting an intruder might have been testing access routes or monitoring the family's routines before making their move. Yet the question itself remains frustratingly vague. Child psychologists point out that young children often confuse the timing of events, mixing dreams with reality or combining memories from different nights. How reliable could a 3-year-old's account of crying last night really be when she might have meant any recent evening? The evening of May 3rd began like any other holiday night. Kate and Jerry put their 3 children to bed around 7:30 p.m. in apartment 5A. The twins, Sean and Amelie, slept in travel cots, while Madeleine lay in the single bed nearest the bedroom window. The parents then joined 7 friends at the Ocean Club's tapas restaurant, roughly 120 yards away from their ground floor apartment. The group had established a routine of taking turns to check on their children throughout dinner. At approximately 9:05 p.m., Jerry made the first check. He entered through the unlocked patio door and walked to the children's bedroom. All 3 children appeared to be sleeping peacefully, but Jerry noticed something odd. The bedroom door, which he remembered leaving slightly ajar, now stood much wider open. He pulled the door back to its original position and returned to dinner without mentioning the detail to anyone. Around 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield volunteered to check on the McCann children along with his own. He later stated he listened at the door but did not actually look inside the bedroom to verify that all 3 children were present. This became a crucial point of dispute. Did Oldfield see Madeleine in her bed, or simply assume she was there because he heard no crying? At 10 p.m., Kate returned to apartment 5A, for what would become the discovery that changed everything. She pushed open the bedroom door and immediately noticed the window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. Madeleine's bed was empty. Kate searched the apartment frantically before running back to the restaurant. Witnesses reported hearing her shout, "They've taken her," words that would define how everyone interpreted what had happened inside the apartment that night. Kate's cry of "they've taken her" immediately transformed a holiday evening into an emergency response that would prove catastrophically inadequate. Within minutes, holidaymakers flooded into apartment 5A to help search, trampling through rooms that should have remained untouched. Resort staff organized frantic sweeps of surrounding areas, while friends and strangers alike handled doors, windows, and furniture inside the apartment. No one secured the scene or controlled access during these crucial first hours. The Portuguese police did not arrive until nearly midnight, almost 2 hours after the alarm was raised. By then, dozens of people had walked through the apartment, moved items, and potentially destroyed vital evidence. The bedroom window remained open throughout the night, allowing wind and weather to further disturb any traces an intruder might have left behind. Border controls and coastal authorities received no immediate alerts about a missing child. The main roads leading away from Praia da Luz saw no roadblocks that night. If someone had taken Madeleine, they faced no barriers to escape during those first critical hours. These delays would haunt every subsequent phase of the investigation, leaving investigators to work with a fundamentally compromised crime scene and conflicting witness accounts shaped by panic and confusion. The most shocking revelation came not from what investigators did, but from what they failed to protect. Within days of Madeleine's disappearance, apartment 5A should have remained sealed as a potential crime scene. Instead, Portuguese authorities made a decision that would compromise the case for years to come. After just a brief initial examination, the apartment was released back to the Ocean Club Resort. What happened next defied basic investigative practice. The resort began renting out apartment 5A to new holidaymakers within weeks of the disappearance. Families arrived with their luggage. Children played in the same bedroom where Madeleine had slept, and cleaning staff scrubbed every surface multiple times. By the time serious forensic teams arrived months later, they faced an impossible task. How could they identify DNA or fingerprints left by an intruder when dozens of innocent people had since lived in those same rooms? Every trace that might have pointed toward Madeleine's fate had been swept away by vacuum cleaners and disinfectant. The Portuguese police later claimed they had gathered all necessary evidence in those first few days. But investigators from other countries who reviewed the case expressed disbelief at this decision. The Cadaver Dog Controversy. 4 months after Madeleine vanished, 2 British dogs arrived at Faro Airport with their handler, Martin Grime. Eddie, a 7-year-old English Springer Spaniel, had spent years learning to detect the scent of human remains. His partner Keela, a Cocker Spaniel, specialized in finding microscopic traces of human blood invisible to the naked eye. These weren't ordinary police dogs. Portuguese authorities had specifically requested these animals after their standard search methods turned up nothing. Eddie had reportedly helped solve dozens of serious crimes across Britain, locating bodies buried for months or hidden in concrete. Keela could detect blood traces so small that crime scene teams missed them completely. When Eddie found cadaver scent, he would bark and scratch at the exact spot. When Keela detected blood, she would freeze and stare. The dog's arrival marked a clear shift in thinking. For months, everyone had assumed Madeleine was taken alive by strangers. Now, investigators were quietly considering whether she might have died in apartment 5A itself. But experienced handlers always stressed one crucial point. Dog alerts mean nothing without scientific proof to back them up. When Eddie and Keela entered apartment 5A on August 2, 2007, they immediately began their systematic search. Eddie moved through the main living area and stopped behind the sofa near the large patio doors. He barked repeatedly and scratched at the floor in the small space between the sofa and the wall, where a curtain hung almost to the ground. His handler recorded this as a clear cadaver alert. Minutes later, Eddie showed similar behavior near the wardrobe in the master bedroom where Kate and Jerry had been staying. Keela followed the same route and froze at locations that overlapped with Eddie's alerts. She detected what appeared to be traces of human blood, both behind the sofa and in the bedroom area. The dog's responses were filmed, creating a permanent record of their behavior that would later fuel heated debate across the world. The physical space behind the sofa was narrow but deep enough to conceal a small body temporarily. Cadaver experts explained that scent particles can linger for months after a body is removed, especially in confined spaces with poor air circulation. The combination of alerts in both living room and bedroom suggested to some investigators that a death had occurred in one location and the body had been moved through the apartment. Yet skeptics raised important questions about these findings. Could equipment used by previous search teams have carried contamination between crime scenes? Had anyone died naturally in apartment 5A before the McCanns arrived? Resort records showed no prior deaths, but the questions highlighted how dog alerts alone create more mysteries than they solve. The dog search expanded beyond apartment 5A to the McCann family's rented villa and their hire car. Eddie made another significant alert when he encountered Cuddle Cat, the pink toy that Madeleine reportedly carried everywhere and slept with each night. The cadaver dog showed clear interest in this beloved possession, which Kate McCann had been photographed holding during public appeals. The most dramatic alerts came at the silver Renault Scenic that the McCanns had rented 24 days after Madeleine disappeared. Eddie indicated cadaver scent around the car keys and boot area, while Keela detected what appeared to be human blood traces in the luggage compartment. These alerts suggested to investigators that a decomposing body had been stored in the vehicle's boot space. The timeline raised disturbing questions. How could cadaver scent appear in a car hired weeks after the disappearance, unless someone had transported human remains? The defense offered several explanations. Kate's work as a doctor exposed her to death scenes. Microscopic traces could transfer from contaminated clothing, and no DNA match confirmed the blood was Madeleine's. Yet the combination of alerts spanning apartment, toy, and vehicle created a trail that some investigators found impossible to ignore. When investigators submitted biological samples from the apartment and car to Birmingham's Forensic Science Service laboratory, they expected definitive answers. The materials included hair strands, fabric fibers, and microscopic traces from the boot where Keela had alerted to possible human blood. Laboratory technicians worked with sophisticated DNA extraction and analysis equipment to process these degraded samples. The official forensic report delivered unwelcome complexity instead of clarity. Scientists confirmed they had detected genetic material that contained multiple DNA contributors mixed together. Some components within these mixed profiles appeared consistent with Madeleine's known DNA reference sample taken from her toothbrush. However, the laboratory concluded the samples were too degraded and complex to make any definitive identification. The difference between consistent with and matches became critical. Mixed DNA profiles from crime scenes often contain genetic material from several people, creating overlapping patterns that resist clear interpretation. The forensic team explained that while they could not exclude Madeleine, As a contributor to some samples, they equally could not confirm her presence with scientific certainty. Somehow, this nuanced laboratory finding transformed into explosive media headlines, claiming investigators had found Madeleine's DNA in the rental car. How did cautious scientific language about partial profiles become definitive proof in public discourse? The scientific puzzle over DNA evidence raised obvious questions about the dogs themselves. How reliable were these cadaver alerts in the first place? The handler emphasized that Eddie and Keela had impressive track records from previous cases across Europe. In several documented investigations, similar trained dogs had successfully indicated human remains months or even years after bodies had been moved from locations. Their alerts had led police to discover crucial evidence that standard searches had missed. Yet other cases told different stories. Court records from various countries revealed instances where cadaver dogs alerted to areas where no human remains were ever found. Sometimes the dogs reacted to cleaning chemicals, animal remains, or even certain types of synthetic materials. Remarkable abilities came with built-in limitations that even their strongest supporters acknowledged. Their alerts represented starting points for investigation, not final conclusions about what had happened. The Portuguese investigation faced another complication. Proper protocol required blind testing, where handlers did not know which locations might contain evidence. But the McCann case involved locations already heavily scrutinized by media and police. How could anyone ensure the dogs were responding purely to scent rather than subtle cues from their environment or handler expectations? These reliability questions split public opinion completely. Some observers viewed the alerts as the most credible evidence in the entire case. Others dismissed them as investigative theater, masquerading as science. When parents become suspects, the case took a dramatic turn on August 11, 2007, when Portuguese investigators brought in specially trained dogs from Britain. These cadaver dogs, known for detecting the scent of death, showed unusual behavior in the McCann's rental car and apartment. The handlers reported that the dogs alerted to specific areas, including behind the sofa in apartment 5A and inside the car the family had rented weeks after Madeleine disappeared. Within days, everything changed. Police had spent months treating Jerry and Kate McCann as grieving parents deserving sympathy and support. Now they began viewing them as potential suspects. The dog alerts seemed to provide the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. After months of dead ends and international pressure to solve the case, they finally had something concrete to pursue. On September 6, Kate McCann was called in for questioning. The next day, both parents were formally declared arguidos, Portuguese legal status, meaning they were official suspects. The shift was swift and absolute. The investigation that had focused on finding an abductor now centered entirely on the possibility that the parents had somehow caused their daughter's death and concealed the body. According to multiple reports, Portuguese investigators presented Kate McCann with what appeared to be a deal during her September 6 interrogation. Sources close to the investigation claimed that officers suggested she could receive a reduced sentence if she admitted that Madeleine had died accidentally after being sedated, and that she and Jerry had concealed the body. The proposed scenario painted a picture of parents who had given their children medication to help them sleep, leading to a tragic overdose that they then covered up out of fear and panic. Kate McCann reportedly rejected this offer outright. Her refusal to accept what investigators viewed as a reasonable explanation for the evidence they believed they had gathered set the stage for an intense 11-hour interrogation session. During this marathon questioning, she declined to answer 48 specific questions on the advice of her legal counsel. The questions ranged from details about the night Madeleine disappeared to direct challenges about her possible involvement. The decision to remain silent sparked fierce debate. Supporters argued that Kate was protecting herself from a hostile investigation that had already decided her guilt. Critics suggested that an innocent mother would answer every question to help find her missing child, regardless of legal advice. This interrogation revealed the complex psychology of high-pressure questioning and raised serious questions about whether investigators were genuinely seeking truth or simply trying to confirm their existing theory. The most troubling aspect of the case for investigators became the shifting accounts of basic facts about that night. Different versions emerged about which doors the McCanns used to enter apartment 5A during their evening checks. Some statements mentioned using the front door with a key, while others described entering through the unlocked patio doors at the back. These discrepancies might seem minor, but they became significant when investigators tried to map exactly how an intruder could have entered and left the apartment. Kate McCann's discovery of the open window and raised shutter in Madeleine's bedroom created another point of confusion. She described finding the window wide open and the metal shutter fully raised, suggesting this was how the abductor had entered or escaped. However, Portuguese police technical reports stated the shutter showed no signs of being forced from the outside. The mechanism could only be operated from inside the apartment. This contradiction became central to the investigation's shift in focus. The bedroom door itself generated conflicting accounts. Some statements described finding it mostly closed as they had left it, while others mentioned it being partially or fully open. Witnesses also disagreed about whether they heard the door creak during checks, a detail that seemed insignificant until investigators began questioning whether anyone had actually entered the room at all. These small inconsistencies accumulated into larger doubts about the reliability of the timeline and the physical evidence supporting an abduction theory. The sleeping twins became another source of intense debate. Throughout the night's chaos, police sirens, searching parties, and frantic conversations in multiple languages, Sean and Emily McCann remained asleep in their cots. Officers noted this unusual calm in their reports. Many parents and childcare experts pointed out that young children often sleep deeply, especially after active holiday days. Others questioned whether any child could naturally sleep through such commotion. Media speculation quickly turned to sedation. Some reports suggested the twins' prolonged sleep indicated the presence of sleeping medication, either administered by parents seeking uninterrupted evenings out or by an intruder wanting to prevent the children from waking during an abduction. Portuguese investigators considered both possibilities, but faced a critical problem with timing. The twins were not tested for sedatives until months after May 3rd. By then, most sleeping medications would have completely cleared their systems. This delay sparked fierce criticism from multiple directions. Some accused authorities of negligence that eliminated crucial evidence. Others argued that testing toddlers for drugs without clear medical need raised serious ethical concerns about their welfare and rights. The sedation question split public opinion down existing fault lines. Critics saw untested theories about drugged children as proof of parental guilt, while supporters viewed such suggestions as cruel attacks on grieving parents. The McCanns faced an impossible choice: stay quiet and appear uncaring about their missing daughter, or speak publicly and risk every word being examined for hidden meaning. They chose visibility, hiring PR experts and launching one of the most extensive missing person campaigns in modern history. Photographs of Madeleine appeared on billboards across Europe. Celebrity supporters made appeals. The Find Madeleine Fund raised millions of pounds. But this high-profile approach divided observers. Supporters saw desperate parents using every tool available to find their child. Critics questioned why suspects in a criminal investigation needed professional media handlers. When Kate and Jerry gave interviews, some viewers noted their composed manner and interpreted it as suspicious coldness. Others saw brave parents maintaining dignity under unbearable pressure. The legal battles proved equally polarizing. The McCanns sued newspapers across Europe for suggesting their involvement in Madeleine's disappearance, winning settlements and apologies. They pursued former detective Gonçalo Amaral through Portuguese courts over his book claiming they covered up an accidental death. These cases dragged on for years, with victories and defeats on both sides. Each court appearance became another test of public opinion. Were they protecting their reputation or suppressing the truth? The phantom witnesses. The charity collector reports began surfacing within days of the search starting. Holiday makers staying near apartment 5A told police about men who had knocked on their doors in the week before May 3rd. These visitors claimed to represent orphanages or hospices that needed donations. When investigators checked with local charities, none could verify these organizations existed. One family reported a man appearing on their apartment balcony, asking for money for children's causes. Another couple described someone knocking persistently, speaking about a hospice that helped sick children. The timing troubled detectives. These encounters clustered around the Ocean Club Resort during the exact period when someone might want to study family routines and apartment layouts. Police mapped these incidents across a wider area than just the McCann's building. The pattern extended to nearby blocks and holiday complexes. Each report described men working alone, carrying clipboards or collection tins, asking personal questions about family schedules. Local police had no record of legitimate charity drives operating in Praia da Luz during that week. The question remained whether these men represented organized reconnaissance, opportunistic scammers, or coincidental charity fraud that happened to occur during the same time frame. How many were watching the families, and what were they really looking for? The most disturbing element in witness accounts involved a man observers described with brutal honesty. Multiple people reported seeing the same distinctive figure over several days before Madeleine vanished. They called him ugly, with visible spots or acne scarring across his face. This wasn't casual observation, but repeated surveillance that followed a clear pattern. On successive days, witnesses spotted him standing directly across from apartment 5A, watching the building for extended periods. Other reports placed him on the balcony of an empty apartment nearby, giving him a clear view of the McCann family's routine. Most concerning was his presence on May 3rd itself, loitering in the area during the afternoon hours before Madeleine disappeared. The timing suggested methodical planning rather than coincidence. Professional investigators know that surveillance often precedes targeted crimes, whether abduction or burglary. But witnesses describing events after a traumatic incident can unknowingly exaggerate details or merge separate memories. The ugly man might represent genuine reconnaissance, opportunistic criminal behavior, or the human tendency to create patterns from random observations. Other mysterious figures complicated the picture further. Two blonde men were reportedly seen arguing intensely after the disappearance became public. Unknown individuals appeared near the resort's outer boundaries at various times. Despite extensive police work and media attention, none of these shadowy figures were ever identified or eliminated from consideration. The accumulation of half-remembered faces created an atmosphere of menace without providing concrete evidence to follow. Jane Tanner's story became the foundation for everything that followed. On May 3rd, around 9:15 p.m., she claimed to have seen a man carrying a child in pink pajamas just yards from the McCann's apartment. The child's legs were dangling, and the man walked purposefully toward the beach. Tanner described him in detail: dark hair, mustache, wearing dark clothes. This single account shaped the entire initial investigation. Police created detailed artist sketches based on her description. Television programs showed reconstructions of the scene. The image of that mysterious man became the face of the case for millions of viewers worldwide. Portuguese and British investigators spent countless hours tracking down men who matched the description. The sighting gave credibility to the abduction theory and provided a clear timeline for when Madeleine might have been taken. Then, in 2013, everything changed. British investigators discovered the man Tanner saw was almost certainly a British holidaymaker returning to his own apartment with his sleeping daughter from the resort's night creche. The timing matched perfectly. His route from the creche passed exactly where Tanner reported the sighting. This revelation destroyed what many considered the strongest piece of evidence in the case. How could investigators now determine which witness accounts were reliable? The sighting that had driven years of investigation suddenly meant nothing at all. The Smith family sighting and its haunting implications. While investigators questioned the value of Tanner's account, another witness report took on greater importance. Around 2200 on May 3rd, members of the Irish Smith family were walking back from a restaurant when they saw a man carrying a young blonde girl toward the beach. The child appeared to be about 4 years old, barefoot and wearing light-colored pajamas. She seemed either deeply asleep or unconscious, her arms hanging limply. Multiple family members witnessed this encounter, making their account more robust than single witness reports. They had not yet heard about Madeleine's disappearance, so their observations remained uncontaminated by media coverage or investigative theories. The man appeared to be in his 30s, with dark hair and normal build. He walked purposefully toward Praia da Luz beach, carrying the child across his arms. What made this sighting particularly significant was its timing. The Smith family spotted this pair roughly an hour after Madeleine was discovered missing. The direction of travel also troubled investigators. Why would someone carry a child toward the beach at that hour? Was this the moment Madeleine was being taken from the resort area entirely? Years later, one Smith family member made a controversial claim about the man's walking style, suggesting it reminded him of someone connected to the case. This observation sparked fierce debate, but was never officially confirmed. Could this fleeting glimpse represent the last documented sighting of Madeleine McCann alive? Moroccan leads, intercepted calls, and discarded international trails. Within weeks of Madeleine's disappearance, reported sightings began flooding in from across Europe and North Africa. Morocco quickly emerged as a focal point for these international leads. A particularly striking report came from Marrakech, where witnesses claimed to have seen a blonde girl at a petrol station who allegedly asked for her mother in English. The child's appearance and age seemed to match Madeleine's description, sparking immediate interest from investigators. Another significant report emerged from the town of Zayo in northern Morocco. Local witnesses described seeing a young girl being forcibly dragged across a street by a woman of North African appearance. The child was said to be blonde and appeared distressed, crying for her family. These accounts reached Portuguese authorities through diplomatic channels and were treated as credible enough to warrant investigation. Intelligence agencies also reported intercepted communications that mentioned a little blonde girl, references to ferry routes between Spain and Morocco, and a German man involved in transportation. These fragments suggested a possible trafficking operation that could have moved Madeleine across international borders within hours of her disappearance. The geographical proximity of Morocco to southern Spain made such a scenario logistically feasible. However, extensive investigations by Moroccan authorities ultimately concluded there was no concrete evidence that Madeleine had ever entered their country. Despite the compelling nature of these early reports, none could be verified through official channels or physical evidence. How did such specific sightings lead nowhere? The German predator connection. Christian Brueckner emerged from Germany's criminal underworld with a history that made investigators take notice. Born in 1976, he accumulated convictions for theft, drug dealing, and sexual offenses across multiple jurisdictions. Court records show he served time for raping a 72-year-old American tourist in Portugal in 2005, just 2 years before Madeleine disappeared. Prison psychological evaluations described him as manipulative and highly dangerous, particularly toward vulnerable victims. During the period around Madeleine's disappearance, Brueckner lived as a transient in the Algarve region. He operated from a yellow and white Volkswagen camper van, moving between temporary accommodations and earning money through petty theft and drug sales. Local records indicate he stayed in a rundown farmhouse just outside Praia da Luz, giving him intimate knowledge of the area's layout and routines. His criminal pattern showed disturbing consistency. German authorities later connected him to break-ins at holiday accommodations where he would steal from tourists, sometimes assaulting victims in the process. Several incidents involved targeting families with young children, raising questions about whether these were purely opportunistic crimes or something more calculated. What made Brueckner particularly concerning to investigators was his method of operation. He preferred striking at night, often entering through windows or unlocked doors, and demonstrated knowledge of when properties would be vacant or occupants asleep. Phone records became central to placing Brueckner near the Ocean Club on May 3rd. German investigators discovered that his mobile device connected to a cell tower covering Praia da Luz around 7:30 p.m. that evening, roughly an hour before Madeleine disappeared. The timing seemed significant, but cell tower data only provides general location areas, not precise coordinates. His phone could have been anywhere within several square kilometers of the resort. Witnesses later recalled seeing his distinctive yellow and white Volkswagen van parked in various locations around Praia da Luz in the days leading up to May 3rd. One resident reported the vehicle near the beach access road that afternoon. Vehicle registration records showed Brueckner had transferred ownership of this van to someone else just 1 day after Madeleine vanished, though he claimed this timing was coincidental. Investigators attempted to map his possible observation points for watching the McCann family's dinner routine at the tapas restaurant. The layout of Praia da Luz offered multiple vantage points where someone could monitor the group's movements without being noticed. However, no witnesses specifically placed Brueckner watching the restaurant or apartment complex. The reconstruction revealed both opportunity and uncertainty. While evidence suggested his presence in the general area, investigators found significant gaps in tracking his exact movements and activities during the crucial evening hours when Madeleine disappeared. Years before anyone heard the name Christian Brueckner, investigators had developed a working theory about a lone predator stalking the Algarve. Multiple disturbing incidents across Portuguese holiday resorts suggested someone was targeting families with young children, entering their temporary homes under cover of darkness. Between 2004 and 2006, at least 10 break-ins occurred at vacation properties where children were present, with several involving sexual assaults. The pattern was chilling in its consistency. The intruder typically chose ground-floor apartments or villas with easy access through windows or patio doors. He moved silently through homes while parents slept, sometimes assaulting children in beds next to their unconscious families. 4 incidents happened in Praia da Luz itself, including one just 17 days before Madeleine vanished. In each case, the man disappeared without leaving clear forensic evidence. Portuguese police had connected these crimes to a single offender they called the man in the window. Witnesses described seeing a suspicious figure near properties before break-ins occurred. The crimes stopped abruptly after May 2007, which investigators later found significant. When Brueckner emerged as a suspect years later, authorities began examining whether this established pattern of predatory behavior could finally explain what happened to Madeleine McCann. How many other crimes might one dangerous individual have committed while moving freely through tourist areas? In June 2020, German prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters made a startling public announcement. He declared that authorities had evidence proving Madeleine McCann was dead and that Christian Brueckner was responsible for her death. The statement sent shockwaves through media outlets worldwide. Wolters spoke with remarkable certainty, telling reporters that German police know what happened to the missing child. Yet behind these bold declarations lay a different reality. No charges had been filed against Brueckner for Madeleine's disappearance. German authorities possessed no body, no confession, and no publicly revealed forensic evidence connecting him to apartment 5A. The gap between public statements and courtroom proceedings became increasingly apparent as months passed without formal action. Legal experts began questioning the strategy. Why announce certainty without bringing charges? Some suggested prosecutors hoped dramatic statements would encourage new witnesses to step forward. Others believed the declaration served to pressure Brueckner psychologically while he faced separate trials for different crimes in German courts. The reality proved more complex than the headlines suggested. Jurisdictional challenges complicated the case, as did Germany's strict evidentiary standards for murder prosecutions. How could prosecutors bridge the distance between strong suspicion and proof beyond reasonable doubt? The Brueckner case presents a puzzle within a puzzle. On one side sits compelling circumstantial evidence. His documented history of breaking into holiday properties through windows matches the suspected method of entry at apartment 5A. His presence in Praia da Luz that evening, confirmed by phone records, places him in the right location at the right time. Multiple sources claim he made suspicious comments about the case to drinking companions over the years. His criminal profile fits established patterns for child predators who escalate from burglary to more serious crimes. Yet the other side reveals troubling gaps. No witness has definitively placed him near the Ocean Club that night. No forensic evidence connects him to the apartment, despite advances in DNA technology. Police found no trace of Madeleine in properties he occupied or vehicles he used. The phone call that located him in the area remains unexplained. But proximity alone proves nothing. His alleged confessions come from sources with questionable credibility, often former cellmates or associates seeking reduced sentences for their own crimes. This divide raises difficult questions about the investigation's direction. Are authorities following genuine leads toward resolution or grasping at the most plausible available suspect? The desire to solve such a high-profile case creates powerful incentives to build a convincing narrative around any promising candidate. Confirmation bias can transform coincidence into evidence and speculation into fact. Even if Brueckner bears responsibility, the passage of time may have rendered justice impossible. physical evidence has degraded or vanished. Witnesses have died or forgotten crucial details. The case demonstrates how criminal investigations operate within narrow windows of opportunity that, once closed, rarely reopen. Unanswered questions. The first 48 hours after Madeleine vanished represent one of the most costly investigative failures in modern criminal history. During these crucial golden hours, when evidence is freshest and perpetrators most vulnerable, Portuguese authorities made decisions that would haunt the case forever. No roadblocks were established around Praia da Luz. No systematic canvassing of hotels and guesthouses occurred. Most critically, investigators failed to secure and preserve video footage from the resort's security cameras and nearby transport hubs before it was automatically deleted. The Ocean Club's CCTV system recorded over its own footage every few days. Staff later told investigators that several cameras had captured the car park and main entrances during the evening Madeleine disappeared. By the time police requested this material, it was gone. Similarly, footage from Lagos Marina, the nearest major transport hub, was never collected. Airport security videos from Faro were not systematically reviewed until weeks later. Mobile phone data presents another devastating gap. Portuguese investigators did not immediately request cell tower records for the Praia da Luz area from May 3rd. This metadata could have revealed which phones were active in the vicinity, their movement patterns, and potentially identified unknown individuals present that night. When authorities finally sought this information months later, much of it had been archived or deleted according to standard data retention policies. The human cost of these omissions compounds daily. Witness identities went unrecorded in those first hours. Early conversations between key figures were never documented. These lost datasets now make it nearly impossible to verify or disprove many theories that emerged later. The dog's behavior that August day remains one of the case's most contentious elements. Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted behind the sofa in apartment 5A, where the McCanns had stayed, and later in the wardrobe of the same room. Keela, the blood detection dog, showed interest in the same areas. Weeks later, both dogs alerted to the Renault Scenic that Jerry and Kate McCann had rented 25 days after Madeleine disappeared. These alerts created immediate controversy. Portuguese investigators saw them as proof that Madeleine had died in the apartment and was later moved using the rental car. The theory suggested her body was temporarily concealed behind furniture before being transported elsewhere. Yet the timeline presents problems. How could traces remain detectable weeks later in locations that had been cleaned and occupied by other guests? Alternative explanations emerged quickly. Kate McCann's work as a doctor meant regular contact with deceased patients. Could residual scents have transferred to her clothing and belongings? Police officers who had handled other death cases also accessed the apartment during searches. The rental car itself might have carried traces from previous incidents unknown to investigators. None of these explanations fully accounts for the specific pattern of alerts. The dog's findings remain suspended between competing interpretations, neither definitively proving death occurred nor completely explained away by contamination theories. 15 years after Madeleine disappeared, the case has become as much about competing memories as missing evidence. Human recollection, already fragile under normal circumstances, buckles completely under the weight of trauma, repeated questioning, and relentless media scrutiny. What witnesses remembered on May 4th differs markedly from what they recalled months later during formal police interviews. The Tapas group faced hundreds of questions about their movements that night. Simple details became contentious. What time did each person leave the restaurant? Who checked on which children when? These seemingly straightforward facts shifted between statements, creating apparent contradictions that investigators seized upon as potential signs of deception. Yet memory researchers know that stress alone can fragment recall, while repeated interviews often contaminate original memories with details suggested by questioners. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child became the most scrutinized witness account in the case. Her initial description evolved through multiple police sketches and reconstruction attempts. Critics pointed to these changes as evidence of unreliability, while supporters argued that trauma naturally affects immediate recall. The truth likely lies somewhere between deliberate fabrication and honest confusion. Media reconstructions and documentary dramatizations have further complicated the picture. Witnesses who participated in these programs often found their memories influenced by the enacted scenes, making it nearly impossible to separate original recollection from constructed narrative. The case became a media storm within hours of Madeleine's disappearance, creating pressures no investigation could fully withstand. Television crews arrived in Praia da Luz before proper forensic teams had finished their work. Portuguese police found themselves conducting searches under the constant gaze of cameras, while British tabloids ran daily front-page stories that often contradicted official statements. This intense scrutiny forced rapid decisions that investigators might otherwise have taken more carefully. Public outrage over perceived failures drove political interventions from both Portuguese and British governments. When Portuguese police faced criticism for their handling of the case, British authorities launched their own parallel investigation through Operation Grange, funded by millions in taxpayer money. Each anniversary brought renewed media attention and fresh demands for progress reports. Documentary filmmakers gained access to key figures, sometimes revealing details that complicated ongoing investigations. The fear of admitting mistakes became increasingly obvious as years passed. Portuguese police defended their early decisions despite clear procedural failures. British authorities avoided direct criticism of their Portuguese counterparts while quietly pursuing different theories. German investigators later claimed breakthrough evidence, but provided few concrete details to support their confidence. Each agency seemed more concerned with protecting its reputation than sharing information that might reveal earlier errors. 17 years have passed since that May evening in Praia da Luz, and the question haunts investigators across 3 countries. Can this case ever reach a definitive conclusion? The answer depends partly on what evidence might still emerge, and partly on whether anyone involved is willing to accept less than perfect certainty. Several developments could theoretically break the deadlock. A credible confession, backed by verifiable details unknown to the public, would carry enormous weight, especially if it explained the cadaver dog alerts and revealed the location of remains. DNA evidence from previously untested samples could prove crucial, though much physical evidence has likely degraded beyond usefulness. Digital forensics might yet reveal phone data, financial transactions, or internet activity that investigators missed during the early chaos. Even witness testimony could prove valuable if someone with direct knowledge finally decides to speak. Yet time works against resolution with each passing year. Key figures from 2007 have died or disappeared from public view. Memories fade and change shape through repetition and media exposure. Physical evidence deteriorates or gets lost in storage facilities. The rental car that sparked such controversy no longer exists. Many surveillance systems from that period use tapes that have long since been overwritten or destroyed. The institutional pressures remain complex. Each police force has invested years and millions in pursuing particular theories, Admitting fundamental errors becomes harder as careers and reputations calcify around specific narratives. The public demands answers, but accepting uncertainty requires a maturity that modern media coverage rarely encourages.